right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to give it a few moments here as we let everyone else join in. If you'd like to open up the chat on the bottom there, please introduce yourselves and let's see where everyone's from. Feel free to drop in any links or LinkedIn's, emails, any of that sort of thing, and let's get a feel for where everyone's at. Before we kick off the interview here with Andy, I'm super excited for this. I think we're going to have a great conversation, and we have he's a fellow Pittsburgh entrepreneur, so I'm excited to talk to him about this. Let's give another few moments here, and I'm going to do a quick screen share here. And if this is your first time checking out Entre or coming to one of our events or anything, this is going to be an interview, one of our founder series that will be going up on our podcast that we're rolling out. It's going to be going up on social media and all of that. You'll get to being part of this live. You get to, tune in, see it firsthand, and you can also ask Andy some questions as well. At the end, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have questions throughout the interview, just feel free to drop them into the chat or feel free to message me directly on there. And let me pull this up here. And all right. So if you haven't already signed up, this is the web version of Entre. You can also download the mobile app, but what we're doing is building a social network for entrepreneurs in the future of work. So our whole goal is helping you as an entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, experienced entrepreneur, get connected to a like-minded community, help you find co-founders, developers, investors, easier, faster, help you share what you're doing, promote what you're doing, ask questions, all of this sort of thing. So you can see here, we have a feed where you can do all of this. You can engage, you can talk to other people, you can have conversations. You can also search very, very easily by content, people, events, jobs, and deals. So what we want to do is make it very easy for you to find who and what you're looking for. So you can search really easy by industry. So if you're just looking for content in music or whatever other industry that may be, or technology or AI, you can do that in one click. If you're looking for specific people, if you're trying to find an investor or a developer, you can one click and sort and filter all the investors on our platform. And then you can just check out their profile and connect with them. You can do similar thing with events. We just rolled out jobs, so you can actually post jobs or apply for jobs if you're looking for gigs or working at startups. Any of that, that's going to be mostly what we'll have here. Looks like it's a little bit delayed here, but let's see if this will load. Might be all the tabs I have open here. Come on. All right. Well, I'll I'll share that I guess later on, but I just wanted to give everyone a quick feel for what it looks like and what they can do on the app. So it's live on Android, iOS, and web, which you just saw, and it's just joinentre.com. And without further ado, I want to introduce Andy and bring him on. Andy, how are you?
Michael, I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. And
yeah,
hi everybody.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I'm super excited for this interview. And for those of you who are listening live, again, or just coming in, make sure you ask some questions in the chat or just directly to me throughout this. But Andy, I'd love to have you, obviously, your background, you've had a lot of experience as a founder. You've done some really, really cool things. You're the co-founder and chairman of Othot. You're a professor at the University of Pittsburgh in entrepreneurship. So I'd love for you to just share your background, your story on, really how you got to this point in time, and fill people in on a little bit of your history.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Thanks, Michael. So, born and raised in Pittsburgh, and really love living here. Went to Penn State for undergraduate and the University of Pittsburgh for graduate school. Started my career at Deloitte, and wanted to actually go to a small company, and went to my first startup in Boston in the mid 1990s called Internet Securities. In the mid 1990s, we were privatizing, well, as countries were privatizing their assets. So the former Soviet Union was looking to create free market economies. We realized that there was a dearth of information about finance and economics, et cetera. So we created the first online information system for the emerging markets. And hooked up a lot of the large banks to the internet for the first time. So I go way back to sort of the roots of the internet and information. We sold that company in late 1990s, and then I started a string of other companies or joined some early ones. I founded 2 of them. So I've been with 5 early stage companies so far. And in the 2000s, as we turned the century, I decided I wanted to get into the classroom and started teaching entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon. Taught there for about 5 years, spun a company out, and we sold that to our largest investor. And then I decided I wanted to get back into the classroom, went to the University of Pittsburgh where I teach advanced analytics, and wanted to start a new company and started Othot. So sort of I would say my career has been sort of the dual path of academics and entrepreneurship. And I'm lucky to have a great family around me too. I have 2 daughters, one who's going to be starting graduate school at Carnegie Mellon this fall. And my youngest daughter is a rising senior at the Schreier School at Penn State. So that kind of gets you to where we are today.
Fantastic. It's so funny too that you've bounced around from Penn State, Carnegie Mellon, and Pitt. It seems like you've kind of hit all the top Pittsburgh schools, which is really funny.
Yeah.
What's that?
All great Pennsylvania institutions.
Yeah, no, I mean some of the top schools in the country for sure. So I love asking kind of, to kick things off is, why did you become an entrepreneur, right? Like what made you start your first company? Was it like, were you always entrepreneurial growing up? Were your parents, family involved in it? Or was it just like you saw a problem and you wanted to solve it? Like, how did you really kind of take that first step?
Yeah, none of the above. So, no, my father was a draftsman. My mother worked in a bank. My brother and I were first gen to college. So there was a sort of a craving to excel, for us to do some great things in the world. I think that's what our parents taught us. And, I discovered a pattern that I like to create new things. So when I was in college, I created, along with my co-founders, a credit union. I created a not-for-profit foundation. Whenever I first graduated from college, I went into new product development at Deloitte. It's sort of, I always found myself wanting to do new things in a different way. And I got to a point with my career where I wanted to join a company that was doing something completely new that nobody's done before. And that's when I joined Internet Securities. I didn't start that one. I was founded by one brother who was at Carnegie Mellon and another brother that was at Harvard. And just fell in love with entrepreneurship at that point. And that's when I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it was definitely a self-discovery process where I looked and said, what is it? What is that pattern that I'm seeing? And it ended up being entrepreneurship. And, once I found it, I'm like been on, I guess, career nirvana since then.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's kind of similar to how it's weird because there's nothing quite like it. And I like to say it's the most addictive drug in the world. It's kind of like once you get a taste of working for yourself, no ceilings to how much you can do, creativity, innovation. There's absolutely nothing like it. And, that's why I enjoy it so much, and, why I want to help other people get to it as well. And I think it's also unlocks the ultimate like freedom when you are in total control of everything, or at least most of the things. You can't control everything, but it allows you to really, be 100% responsible. There's a lot of accountability and willpower. I love to, if there's any things too, I want to get into, how you kind of took these first steps, like actually starting your company. Yeah, you talked about it there briefly, but were there any key indicators, like, proof of concept or traction that you're like, okay, this can actually be something? And there's definitely ways to make money here, and there's definitely something here that we can build upon. Was it instant? Was it gradual? Maybe going through, if you can share some of the obstacles that you had to go through or overcome in those early days, if there's anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, first of all, I think let's not forget luck, because there is a lot of good fortune in successful entrepreneurial companies, because you're essentially hitting a wave at the right time. And you might have a great idea, but you might be years and years ahead. I would characterize my fourth company, Plextronics, which was creating semiconductor and conductive inks out of plastics that's used to print OLED devices and printed solar cells. Yeah, that doesn't sound like data and analytics, which is what I'm into now. But we're probably 20 years ahead of our time with that company. Great company, it found a great home. We sold it to our largest investor, but we missed the timing. Whereas if you look at the first company that I joined, that we hit two waves at the same time. One was the creation of these new emerging markets in the former Soviet Union, so just a need for data and information. But secondly, the distribution of data over the internet just wasn't understood in the mid-1990s. So we were able to take advantage of that wave. And so we hit that at the right time. So I think, yeah, you want to look at where there's needs, but somehow you want to work in, you got to love being at home with Zoom. So, but somehow you got to work in that timing piece of it. So as far as obstacles go, I mean, every company has obstacles, right? So there's friction in some way, and that's often what we talk about in our companies, is how do you reduce friction, right? So what is it that's causing you friction? Is it that you're having trouble hiring people or raising money, or and you focus the company's resources on solving that particular problem, or whatever that friction is at the time? And it becomes sort of a building block type of mentality. If you try and build a company where you're trying to tackle all those things at one time, you're going to have a very difficult time succeeding. So some of it is knowing when to add money, when to add advisors, when to add, well, you always want to add customers, but when to take on, when your product is ready for customers to take it on. And so I think the biggest obstacle is knowing how to sequence those building blocks and not try to do too much at one time.
Interesting. Kind of like take it in phases, and understanding when you're ready for each phase. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, so you may, I always like to think about it as parlaying, right? So if I can bring in an investor who understands my industry, can I parlay that into going to an institutional or angel investor and say, hey, look, I have this person, and so I bring on now what do I do with that money, right? So do I build product? Do I acquire a customer? Do I hire a couple people? And so you have to sort of know where that goes, and then you run out of money.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to go full circle back again. So you have to sort of know when to feed the company. And I'm talking about a company that's not starting off with 10 million in the bank. I'm talking about companies that are starting off building it brick by brick with maybe angel funding or, some low level of venture funding.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is a good time to bring up funding as well. And I think a lot of the investors that we talk to, and we were just on with Sydney Sykes earlier today on a live stream. She runs Black VC, but she's also an angel investor. And she was talking a lot about, what you're saying here too, is like, you might not necessarily need venture funding, but when you do, make sure that you understand what you're doing with the money and that you need the money for these specific things and whatnot. I think that's a common thread that I've been hearing a lot, for sure. But I mean, you've raised over like $80 million, I think, for Plextronics, and I'm sure you've raised probably way more than that with Othot too. So, we can talk a little bit about, obviously there's probably different stages that you've raised this funding in. I'm sure you've probably gone through all sorts of different rounds of funding, from angels to VCs to maybe even some private equity and stuff too. So I'd love to, have you share your thoughts on, going from, getting your first angel investors to then taking on more traditional venture funding, right? And how, the differences between those, and then, how do you approach, because a lot of our audience are early stage founders and whatnot. Some have already raised maybe their first round, second round, or a lot of people are looking to raise those first rounds of funding from angel investors and stuff. So maybe it'd be great to, talk about your experience raising funding, and then maybe some advice for people who are approaching investors right now.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough in my career. I think I'm up over 110 or 20 million in terms of capital and transactions. And it has been from every category you can imagine, from angels to well-known venture funds, to small venture funds, to corporate venture funds. So I've had that opportunity. And I think what makes a successful relationship, I think first thing that people need to understand is that like customers, there's good and bad customers. Like you can sell your product, the best product in the world, and you can be the best salesperson. And if you sell it to somebody who really isn't going to use that product or be a good customer, that you've wasted a lot of time, because they don't become a referenceable customer. They really can't take advantage. I see the same way. Do they really understand what you're trying to build with your company? And I like to start, when I raise company for the first time, I like to start people who know the problem that I'm trying to solve, right? So if I can $200,000 or $500,000, somebody who understands what I'm trying to do, then that parlay comes back in, right? So then I can go to a different and say, okay, these people understand, let me explain to you what I'm doing. So you're constantly trying to find people time frame. There's nothing worse than setting up somebody that thinks that you're going to exit your company in years, and when you have a 10-year horizon, right? When you want to manage the investor as an entrepreneur. And so I have lots of long conversations with to achieve how big do we think the company can be, what are the hurdles. It builds a relationship that, so don't money, that vital and firm to.
Hey, sorry, you were breaking up a bit there. I think I got most of that, and I think a lot of it you were kind of talking along the lines of making sure you're finding the right investors. and people who are in line with, what you're building and where you're going, and making sure you're taking the right money. I don't know if you can still hear me well, or if you want to jump on. I know you mentioned the internet, if you want to jump on your hotspot, but I think I think you're back on.
Hotspot's coming up. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just gonna plug in the phone.
Good, no worries. This stuff happens. Can everyone else hear me okay, at least? If you can drop in the chat real quick if you can hear me, and then we'll give it a second.
Michael, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on hotspot at this point.
Okay.
And
yeah, it looks like I think we're good.
So you caught the main points there, right? Which is that you need to really understand the people and the sources of money that are coming to you, right? Because it's a relationship, investors, it's like having a very deep relationship. It's like a familial relationship, and you want that to endure over time. And it only happens when you understand each other in a pretty deep way. So I think that's important in the early stages of a company. Because
100%.
Yeah, and it won't be your only round, right? So there'll always be more rounds. So one thing that I've learned, that you're always raising money.
Always raising, yeah. I think it's right in line with how we've approached it too. It was something where both of our investors right now are really people who are part of what we're doing. We've met them through our events. They enjoy what we're doing. They want to be a part of it. They understand that they were an entrepreneur previously, so they understand the pain points that we're solving. And they understand that this is a massive market opportunity, that the economy is shifting towards entrepreneurship, freelancing, and this whole new kind of working environment. And that LinkedIn has been the only player in the business networking space for however long, and that there needs to be a new modern social network for this market. And there's a lot of I think there's a lot of benefits having people that are not just expecting a return on their capital, but they like being a part of what you're building too. And I think when that's aligned, it really makes a lot of sense. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think that's really important for people to understand too, is yes, you want capital, but be smart about it and make sure that you don't get screwed too. Cause I know a lot of founders who they just take money and then they end up giving up on their company, or they have bad terms, and then it ends up just taking the whole company south.
Yeah, and that's where it's important to have the right kind of advisors, right? And including lawyers. And the right lawyer that understands these transactions, understands how to put agreements together, the impacts of all the preferences on preferred stock. So either advisors or a good lawyer will save you a lot in the long run.
And I think that's actually a great next talking point as well, is about mentors, advisors, and just surrounding yourself with the right people. So how did you start bringing on advisors? And did you just, did you pay them? Did you just give them equity? Was it just like a more friendly relationship? And how did you approach them? How did you start getting high quality people to surround yourself with? How did that work?
Yeah, I've always sought out thought leaders, and the first place to look for thought leaders is, in my opinion, is at universities. So it's sort of, you'll see there's a lot of theme in my companies between some connection with universities and the entrepreneurial experience. So at Plextronics, there's world experts in conductive polymers and printed inks, and through one of my co-founders, we were able to build a network of those people that then surrounded the company. And the important part about that is not only learning about the problems you're trying to solve, but it's the credibility that it brings the organization. So I always talk to young entrepreneurs about your first step should be about building credibility, whether that's with your first customer, with your advisors, with people you're able to hire. These bring credibility with you. And so at Othot, the first thing, so we're an AI-based company that's focused on higher education. And so higher education, again, you see that theme that weaves through what I do. Have a lot of friends at the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon, and that's the first place I went to. I said, okay, who's doing really unique things in the AI space as applied to different industries? And found somebody at CMU, found somebody at the University of Pittsburgh who led me to who became the person that became our chief data scientist. So it's sort of like using that network through those advisors, to find those advisors, and then to find people through those advisors, and eventually clients or customers through those advisors. In terms of pay, it's mostly small amounts of equity that I've compensated advisors with. It all depends on sort of the relationship with them, because people come and they go. Sometimes they're transient, right? So you have an advisor for 6 months. It's not, they help you for a very specific amount of time, and maybe they get something out of it too, because you're giving them credibility because they're part of a startup. Yet you sort of have to understand, what is that? Is it a long-term relationship? I like to give equity. Short-term relationship, how much can I pay you to help us out? So it's understanding the right mix of those things, of those compensation mechanisms to bring in those advisors.
Gotcha. No, I think that's great advice, and it's funny too, because we got connected through one of our advisors. Phil is an advisor of Entre, so I actually knew Phil previously beforehand, actually through like one of my friends, and we just would talk at the gym every once in a while. I didn't even know he was in startups and all this stuff. And then I met him at an event, and I was like, Phil, what are you doing here? And he's, then everything took off, and that was an easy fit, because he's a great guy, and he's really focused on helping entrepreneurs and startups and all of that. And he's been in the industry for a long time. He has a lot of connections. And that was something where I was like, all right, great. Well, we can't bring you on full time. Like, we don't have, the funding yet to do that, but let's just keep it, informal. We'll give you a little bit of equity, introduce us to people, help out with some of the, just advising, and we'll keep you updated and stuff. And, we'll see where it goes. Right. And, and I think I encourage a lot of people, we have a couple similar situations like that with some people, and, it's been great for us, and it's worked out really well. And I think, it does work both ways. They can say they're part of the startup, and then you can tell people that you have, this person as, an advisor of the company, which gives you, again, credibility. I think if there's anything I've learned over the last few years, like credibility and traction, proof of concept, those are all the things that investors are looking for, right? Especially at the early stages. It's like, can I trust this person? Is there some proof of concept and traction that I can build on? And then how big can this actually go? Or like the kind of, and if you want to add something to that, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. One is that you use the word trust, which is critical, right? So whether it's with your first customers, whether it's your first employees, your investors, people want to be in business with people that they trust. And that's important. So you have to commit to those individuals that if they give you your money, or they give you their business, or they turn their lives over, their careers over to you, that you're going to do everything possible to make them or the opportunity successful. And it's that commitment that people understand. They can look you in the eye and they can say, I believe that this person is going to make this a success no matter what. I think that, to me, is how I recruit, how I raise money, how I work with my customers. I'll give you an example. We had early on in Othot, we had a new customer in Delaware, and there was a problem with bringing them up on our platform. And I was talking, I said, Chris, we're going to fix it. And, Chris is like, I'm trusting you that we're going to do this. I called up my CTO and my co-founder, and I'm like, hey, we got to go to Delaware. We literally got in the car the next morning, at 5 in the morning and drove to Delaware, sat with Chris and said, Chris, here's how we're going to solve your problem. And we formulated this in the car on the way down. And we got there, we made hour and a half coffee, made him feel comfortable, drove right back to Pittsburgh. The great end of that story is that Chris now works for Othot. So that's, you know, how these relationships get forged. And when you demonstrate your commitment to success and your commitment to winning and your commitment to the other person that's involved in the transaction, it pays dividends that you can't even see right now. So that trust word, don't throw that trust word around. I'm not saying that you do, but that's not, you don't want to throw that trust word around lightly. And if you want to be successful, practice trust.
That was so perfectly said. And I practice trust it's something that I think a lot of people overlook it, like you were just talking about right there at the end. And it's something that it's, in my opinion, the future of companies. I think going forward now, everything is going to be built on being authentic, being genuine, actually providing value, not just being transactional and salesy and all of this stuff. And I think there's a few other layers to that with privacy and trust as well. And for Entre, we want to build a spam-free social network. Like, we're literally going to be deleting people. Like, there's already been some people coming in that are doing Forex stuff or, you know, sales, promoting things. We're just straight up deleting them, like off the platform. You know, they get a little warning and then it's done, because there's a huge issue right now with a lot of platforms with spam and, you know, salespeople and all this other stuff. And I think, you know, our whole thing is, you know, we want to be the place that entrepreneurs trust, right? That's a very important thing to us, if not the most important thing that we are doing, because we understand that if entrepreneurs trust us more than any other platform, we're going to be successful no matter what. And I think if, you know, and I don't know if you want to add anything onto this, and I wasn't planning to talk about this for a while, but I think this is a really important topic too, that, you know, you can find that one thing that it's like, all right, people are going to trust us for this. And then that's their, like, almost why. So I don't know if you want to add anything else onto this, but I think it's a great talking point.
I think it's a right concept. And so, you know, so trust, when you have trust, things snowball. People come to you, people want to work with you. You know, and the example I'll give related to LinkedIn, everybody I'm sure on this podcast is probably really good at networking, what they call networking, right? So how many connections do you have on LinkedIn? You know, there's nobody on this call that probably has anything less than 500, right? And most have probably a couple thousand. Here's what I would challenge you to do. Delete most of them. And I don't mean most of them. I mean, call your list. Because when somebody reaches out to me and says, Andy, you're connected to X, can I rely on that person? Or how do you know that person? Why are you connected to that person? There's nothing that drives me more crazy if I see somebody that I know and I reach out to them, I'm like, oh, you know, I have this potential new customer and I see you're connected to them. You know, can you tell me, what can you tell me about this person? I have no idea. I don't even know who that person is. And so it breaks down the fabric of what a network is supposed to be. So I always coach my students, in fact, that networking is incredibly important, but you have to network for a purpose, which is that you're going to use that relationship for something. And so it sounds like at Entre, that's what you're doing, right? You're making sure that you're keeping this pure and connected and strong. And that may mean that you have to grow that network slower than you would if you were just going to take all comers. But the value that you'll grow in keeping that network pure and strong and relying on each other, that trust factor, the more value you're going to build. And I think that's what's been my biggest sort of, I always ask people, like if we were in, so I'll ask you, Michael, what's your superpower?
I love that. I think my superpower is connecting entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs. That's what I've dedicated the last 3 years to, and what I'm dedicating the next, at least 10 plus to. There's nothing else that I enjoy doing than having conversations like this with other entrepreneurs. And when I first got into all this stuff, I had no idea what I was doing. I used to be an engineer. None of my friends were entrepreneurs, and my family were entrepreneurs. So I was just trying to connect with like-minded people. And then when I understood how to start a business and was, doing some things, I was like, wow, this actually isn't that hard to start a business. It's hard to grow a business and be successful for many years, but it's not hard to start. And even just me, just with the little experience that I know I can help a lot of people just with what I have. So if I can connect people together, now we can, make entrepreneurship accessible to way more people, and we can streamline entrepreneurship so it's easier to start. So that was kind of the aha moment that I had. And I'd love to swing the question back to you as well. And I'm sure you knew that was coming, but I'd love to learn what your superpower is too.
Yeah, thank you for the question. But I mean, I would call your superpower some form of glue.
Glue.
Right. So I mean, it is, yeah. I mean, and I like to look at my teams in that way, because if you were if your team all had the same superpower, you wouldn't be the Justice League, right? Or if you're a Marvel fan, whatever. What do they call them? What's the Marvel? The Marvel.
The Avengers.
Group? Yeah, the Avengers. Yeah, something like everybody has to have a superpower that, because collectively, you're stronger than the individual, and if everybody was the same, obvious. Mine is relationship building. I love people, right? I love to learn about them and understand them, and that goes back to that genuine piece, right? That trust piece. If I care more about you and what you're trying to accomplish, and by the way, isn't that what sales is about? And isn't that what raising money is about and hiring people? How can I make your life better or easier? But you got to want that. And you've got to, I often say that I collect people, because I love to understand sort of what makes people motivated to do what they do, or what impacted them in their lives to turn out how they turned out. And that to me is a fundamental core of relationship. And when you lose yourself in that discussion, and you feel like they are all consumed by, or I'm all consumed by what their story is, you forge some sort of bond. So that's what I would say. And I think that's how you sell. I want to make your life better. I want to solve your problem.
I think now more than ever as well, any type of job in entrepreneurship business that requires any form of sales, or really if you're selling anything, it's all about building the relationship, right? If you look at even just like real estate investors, realtors, financial advisors, any of those industries, salespeople, whatever, it's all about building relationships. And then same side, even if you're a professional, it's like that. If you're an entrepreneur, it's even more like that, because you have to get people to trust you and understand you on a deeper level for them to even not just have you buy something from them, but actually invest like several $100,000s, if not millions of dollars into you. Right. So I love that. And I think it's really critical. I think the more people that know who you are and know what you do on like, a personal level, if you can have a huge, network like that actually really knows you and knows what you do, you can be massively successful with that. So I love this. I wasn't expecting to get on this topic, but I think it was great, and I'm glad you brought it up. I'd love to jump into, you mentioned quickly, you're a professor at Pitt. I want to talk about this it's kind of a hot topic right now between, college and, starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur, right? You obviously are kind of on both sides of the table here. So I think you could bring a really great perspective for this, especially right now with everything going on. A lot of universities are going online. A lot of people are questioning the value of universities and things like that. And, whether they should just put the money into starting a business or just trying to go to community college or whatnot. I tell people all the time, university or college is literally the best place to start a business, right? If you are in college, right? I'm not saying that's the best choice for you, depending on what you're doing in your financial situation, but you have unlimited resources. You have professors that are all around to help you out, and you have access to a bunch of different things. You have people who are always around you that are willing to work for free for equity to start something. And you have thousands of people to test out a product or service right there at your school. So when you break it down like that, that's how I look at it. Although I also have the thing where if you want to be an entrepreneur in business, going into college is, it might not be the best thing. And I think it's more than ever a financial decision. If you can get scholarships and you can get, or if your parents are helping with that, then, it's worth it, because it's the only time you can do it. And it's a very important, I think, social aspect to it as well. But I wanted to throw out my thoughts there real quick, just so I can at least set the pace, so we're not just completely bashing on college or anything, or I didn't want to make it seem like I'm super against it or anything either. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and we can have a little discussion on this topic.
Yeah, I think college is being redefined. So we're seeing that, and it's the abrupt change is happening. So, college, I think from here forward will be more of a hybrid type of existence. And I think long term you'll belong to multiple colleges, right? So I think that because you'll take classes from different professors because they have different skill sets at different universities, that'll have to be stitched together in some way, so that it becomes an accredited type of program. And that'll happen, and it is happening. We're seeing that with different modes of education. As we look at certificates and we look at badges and we look at all the different ways. So what we call education in college today in 10 years will be completely different. But the one thing that college does is it does give you that ability to be on your own for the first time, free thinking, with lots of other people who are trying to figure out life. And that's all about learning and developing intellectual curiosity. Because if I had to say one, there's some top aspects of successful entrepreneurs. I think one of the ones that comes to the top to me is that intellectual curiosity, wanting to solve something, wanting to understand something at a deep level so that you can then solve it. So I think we have to find a way to continue to create at an affordable price where students can still go away and get that experience and learn how to learn. The problem is that with entrepreneurism, I call it a sandbox for entrepreneurs, because you don't know how to scale a company. There's this, you're full of energy and courage and ideas, which is awesome, but you have no idea how to build a company. And so you have this sort of how do you bridge that gap? And I often tell students, start a company while you're in college, because you can learn what it's like to start a company. Then go work for a large company for 3 years, because you want to know how human resource systems work and how accounting systems work and how engineering pieces work. And then quickly leave, because if you stay there too long, you'll make too much money and you'll get too comfortable, and then you'll own a house and you have a spouse and you'll have multiple babies, and then all of a sudden, you can't do anything. So you have to leave at the right time, then go work for a successful entrepreneur. So that's my recipe when unfortunate students get an earful from me. It is create something now, go work for a big company, leave quickly, work for a successful entrepreneur, and then go start a company. Because you need those experiences in order to be successful when you really do start that killer company, or you join a bunch of entrepreneurs who started a killer company, and you know how to bring different experiences to bear and add value.
Interesting. I love that a lot. I think that's a really great kind of, if you break it down into phases, that's really smart doing it that way. I think obviously everyone has different paths that they go down. I wish I was much more, if I had the mindset I do now, I would have crushed college and I would have like done it very differently. I'm not saying that I didn't do it proper. Like I had way more fun. I was focused more on fun than, actually capitalizing on the advantages of being in college from a business or entrepreneurship perspective. And I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship. I was thinking about, getting, passing my classes, having fun, and then getting a solid job after, which is what most people think of, and I wish more colleges would be, and I think Pitt and CMU, especially CMU, and there's other colleges that are doing good jobs of this, and I think it should be done more, is they should have programs for kids who are interested in entrepreneurship, and instead of them taking classes, they should have, they should start a company, and that is their class. And I think it would be interesting to see how that would play out. If I were to go back in time, I would have, I don't think I would have worked for, I don't think I would want to work for a large company necessarily, but I would 100%, I would have gone on Crunchbase or AngelList or whatever. I would have looked through all the startups that just raised a huge round of funding, like 50 to 100 million or more. I would have gone through all the companies. I would have looked at all the founders, and I would have said, this company's really cool. This founder is awesome. And I would have hit them up until they gave me a job, right? Or maybe the top 5 companies.
Yeah.
And that would have, I probably would have saved myself probably 2 years of just learning because there's learning like an online business or small business, and then there's learning a tech startup and high growth company, right? Not many people want to build billion-dollar companies. And there's a lot of differences that go into building those companies than just building an online business or being a real estate investor or all of those things. Some of the same principles apply, but if you want to build a billion-dollar company, you have to understand how to talk to investors, how to hire, how to build systems, how to really like scale and do all of those things that are required to get to that level. And even just talking the lingo of Silicon Valley and the tech startup, culture. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit too. I know you're in AI, education. I think that you're probably in a very hot space right now with everything going on. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you're currently doing, where you see maybe education going a little bit too, not in just regards to college, but what you're doing and how that's impacting things. I think you're spot on with that. People are going to take, courses from multiple colleges. Coursera's kind of already doing this a little bit. I think edX is another one that's doing some stuff. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more. I think it's an interesting topic and very relevant now that school's coming back.
Yeah, so a lot to react to. One thing that you said that bothered me a little bit, that you wanted to change your path.
Well, I would never do that, but if I were, it's like I don't regret anything. You know what I mean? Because
don't
is
take me literally. I'm actually a little theatric for the audience, which is everybody has their own path, right? I know you know that. But you know, it's often, you have to look at yourself and say, am I happy where I am today? And you know, you won't, a lot of you won't know that for years, but I mean, that's whatever path took you to where you are. It might have been difficult for some reasons and great at other times, but that path is so important to making you who you are. So it's just public service announcement for liking yourself. But what I would say on education side, so what we decided to do at Othot was develop an AI platform that helped schools find the best fit students. And then once those students are on campus, how do we make sure that they persist and graduate, get great job, and remain engaged as alumni? And so we get to know, our platform gets to know an individual from the time that they're in high school until their last days on earth, right? And it learns about the behavior of that individual, and it optimizes the relationship, right? So if can we identify a student who eventually will drop out with a 1.6 grade point average when they still have a 3.0 grade point average, right? So they haven't fallen into that ditch yet. How do you identify what data tells us about that individual? What data tells us, and analytics tells us what courses or what professors or what internships or what R&D project is going to enable you to reach the end that you want to reach, right? So if you want a particular job, how can the data and analytics, because we know the 1,000 people that came before you and got that job that you want. So what is it about who you are in the pathways, those 1,000 different pathways that help us take you to that end? And so those are the types of things that you can do with AI that people really don't quite yet understand. Most industries will have companies like ours that are all about optimizing the relationship between the customer and the company that's selling them something. And that's really what education is.
Yeah.
And so what we like to think about as a long-term, you should have a lifelong relationship with the institutions that you are involved with. And that means that you should be getting educated the rest of your life. And so why can't there be some type of subscription revenue service for the school, but an educational experience for the individual that understands the progression that you take through life, and whether it is to enhance who you are as a person or to improve your career or whatever, that data should inform, and I should be providing that to you to make your life better. And so you can only do that with data and analytics. I mean, this is, there's nobody that's going to sit in a chair and say, hey, my gut tells me you're going to be a Big Four accountant and you're going to have, 6 kids. You're eventually going to want to learn all you can about sort of, global warming or whatever the topic might be. But your behavior tells us that, and we can offer these things to you as you go along. So I see, so to answer sort of the bigger question that you asked, that education will change not only in how it's delivered while you're in college, but it'll change throughout your life, because you'll learn from different institutions, but you'll learn based off what your hobbies might be. But that data should inform the institution of what we can provide to you.
Yeah, I think that it's super interesting. Number one.
Am I unstable right now?
Yeah, you're going a little in and out, but I got all of that, I'm pretty sure. I think it's super interesting. I think there's so much that's going to be changing with AI and data. You're so forward thinking with all of this. It's one of those things where it's kind of creepy how much like companies are going to know about people and whatnot. But, if it's done in the correct way, it's only going to benefit the individuals more, right? Yes, there's going to be, some benefit to the companies as well to offer them better services and, maybe potentially make more money. But at the end of the day, it's going to be set up to help the individuals the most. And I think there's no reason that, the most successful people are lifelong learners. they do not stop after college. They keep learning. That's how you keep getting good at business and generating wealth, because things change. Business is dynamic. Even the biggest companies in the world change their business model, change up their branding, try out different platforms and marketing strategies. You have to adapt. You have to understand that things are going to change. And if you don't learn the new things, biggest thing right now is TikTok. It's by far the best way to get organic marketing reach. I'm telling everyone to get on TikTok right now, because we've just with ourselves, we've noticed like the big thing. If you're spending a bunch of time on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all stuff, put your stuff out on TikTok and start building your brand on there, because you can reach way more people. Now, obviously, depending on your business, it might not be the people that you want to attract.
Right.
At the same time, it's reach nonetheless, and it's brand awareness nonetheless. I want to get into some questions here, because I know we're running up on time. I want to be respectful of your time, because I appreciate you being here and doing this. We have a couple of questions here. I want to get to Eric's question that he messaged me about, and this kind of goes back to the trust thing. So he wants to know, how can you build trust with someone, like an investor, for example, or someone that you're trying to pitch, or someone that you really want to either join your team or invest in your company? How do you start building that trust, right? Because obviously you don't want to come out the gates and like try to get them to trust you right away or something like that. How do you go about doing that? Obviously it's going to take some time. It's going to be hard to do it instantly, but what's your advice for that? How do you build trust or build a relationship with someone?
Yeah, I always start, whether it's investor or customer or whatever, or even if it's a personal relationship, is sort of, what are your objectives, right? So if it's an investor, like, so you invest in companies, what type of companies do you invest in? What has been your most success? By the way, I can ask a million questions in a minute. And I think that question process is what really drives trust. Wanting to learn about that individual and what's important to them, and why you might be able to solve that, or why you're a good fit for that. And sometimes you have to say, you know what, this has been a great conversation, but we're probably not a good fit. We're not far enough along. We haven't solved we haven't hit some of the milestones that you typically look for. And I guarantee you, when you tell somebody that, they're going to say, okay, well, we got to keep in trust. We got to keep in contact, because when you do hit those milestones, you're the type of entrepreneur that I want to invest in. So I think that questioning and understanding what motivates people, and you truly having, wanting to know the answers and having empathy for that other person is what starts that trust off on the right foot.
I think that's really important. I think empathy, understanding their position too, and understanding if you were in their shoes or seeing the lens through their perspective, I think is really important as well. Eric had another question here that you kind of were touching on as well. When is the right time to look for investors, right? Obviously, this is very different for different industries and stuff. You know what I mean? He's asking about traction. Should you approach investors after you have traction? Should you do it before you launch? When is that time? Obviously, depending on what you're building, if you're building a high-tech company, it's going to take a lot of money to build out this crazy new hardware or thing, and there's no way to prove or get traction until you can build it. It's going to be different. But do you have any recommendations for that? I know you hinted on it a little bit there, but if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it at all.
It's really hard. I mean, a lot of it depends on sort of your experience as well. Like I'm blessed because of my experience. I can go out and raise money for a new idea, right? So because I've had success in the past, and I can convince people that this is the next idea, this is going to be successful, we need money to get off the ground. If this is your first venture and you're, a 21-year-old rising senior at the University of Pittsburgh, really hard to convince people that they should give you their money. So I think a lot of it has to do with building that credibility. If I can build different pieces of credibility, like I have an advisor who are willing to say, yeah, this is the next great thing, I had my first customer and I actually got somebody to quit their job and join me. Okay, I got credibility, now I can go out and raise money. So it is, what are the assets you're building that allow you to raise money? And the more success you have, your assets become your credibility itself. And somebody looks at your LinkedIn profile and goes, okay, I want to be involved in that next business.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I totally agree. It depends on your experience, because there's some people who, just because they had a previous startup, they can go out and raise, $100 million or whatever. I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, any company that he starts, he can raise however much money, $1 billion the next day if he wanted to. You know what I mean? So, it's different. I think depending on the company and depending on your experience level for sure. But again, I think it always goes back to trust, credibility, proof of concept too, right? And you can throw experience in there as well. But we have another question here from Sandra. It looks like she is still in college and is looking to start a startup in the near future. Is there any advice that you would give her? I know you touched on some of these things earlier. Is there any other advice that you would give someone who's currently in college right now that is interested in startups, that things that they could do while they're in college? Obviously you mentioned getting a job at a big company, then a startup, and then starting.
Right. If you want to start a company while you're in college, I think you need to attract 2 critical advisors. The first thing I tell students is find somebody who understands your problem better than anybody on the planet, or, that understands it really well. And then somebody who knows how to build a business, so that knows how to be an entrepreneur. Those 2 advisors will be the best investment of time that you could make, because they'll help you understand the problem and how to build that company. And so I think and people find advisors, but Phil Compton's a great advisor because he gets to work, right? He gets to work for you. He does things for you. He finds people to be on your podcast, et cetera. But and you got to put your advisors to work. And are they actually going to deliver what you need them to deliver? And if they're not, you got to move on to the next one. And sometimes, especially young entrepreneurs, are just happy to have somebody with a name that's on their advisory board. That's great, but put them to work and keep the ones that actually do work. And those are 2 that I'd start with.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. I would also encourage you to find another fellow student too that you could work with on it, because it's really, and it's one of the reasons why we started Entre, is because entrepreneurship can be very lonely at times. And if you're doing it by yourself, you're going to have a lot of thoughts, questions, things going on in your head. If you don't have another person there to talk to about it, it can be really difficult. That's where advisors come in, but having someone in the trenches with you too, I think would help. And there's no better place to find a co-founder who's willing to work for free than college. As soon as you get out of college, finding a co-founder becomes literally, I would say, 5 to 10 times harder to find. Yeah. So that's the only other thing that I think if I were to do it, that's the only other thing that I would add on top of that. We have one more question here, and then we'll wrap things up because we're a little bit over time here. But we have a question here about expanding analytic tools to talent search industry. I know you've done AI, obviously data for education. Do you see this impacting maybe the talent industry or other industries as well in regards to this? I mean, obviously talent and education are kind of blended in a sense, because, you're trying to really, education is designed to set people up to, get a job and all of that stuff. Do you see is there going to be a blend that's going to be happening with analytic tools in that? I don't know if you guys are, trying to do this as well with your platform, and set people up also. So like you mentioned the job thing and like, if you take these classes and go on this trajectory, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and maybe other industries too that you think could be impacted by, more analytics, AI, things like that.
Yeah, so let's get one thing straight. AI will fundamentally change every single industry, just like the internet. It's funny because in my undergraduate class last night we talked about innovation and the impact that innovation has, and as you can see it when you look backwards, right? So the internet fundamentally changed the world and created companies like Alphabet, right, and companies like Amazon. They did not exist. And you can look back further and you can look at, personal computers and the impact that they had on software like Microsoft, et cetera. So you can look backwards and see these things. It's very difficult to look forward and say what's next. And we happen to be living in a time when AI is next and is having an impact. And there's no industry, no company that won't be disrupted by this technology. And I'll just give one quick example, and it's from Amazon. So what AI allowed Amazon to do first was predictions. Those predictions, those recommendation engines are 5% effective. The second thing that AI is going to do is drive that 5% way up to 50%, 10 times better. Imagine, because it's going to know you better, and it's going to give you products that you want. It's going to make recommendations. The third thing, and it's already doing it, is fundamentally changing business by delivering products to your doorstep that they know that you won't send back because, yeah, I need it. So they're completely cutting out the competition's ability to sell to you. This is AI at a level that it's even hard, but 10 years ago would have been impossible to comprehend. And every industry will go through that. So yes, looking at human resources or functions, it will fundamentally change who we hire, our expectation of how long that they'll stay with the company, the types of skill sets that they're going to need, because we'll understand people better than we ever have. It's yes, we will replace humans from a basic information gathering perspective and basic understanding. It does not replace judgment. It actually increases the value of people who understand the issues, and judgment becomes the value. It's the complement that becomes the value. Substitute will be people making decisions based on their guts. And so this is how we're fundamentally changing the world with AI. And there's nobody in higher education that's doing what we're doing with AI. There are 100 different industries where nobody's really using AI like it needs to be used. So if I was going to start a fund, I would make it an AI fund, and it would be focused on companies and industries where AI really hasn't taken hold yet.
I think that's really insightful. I'm a huge believer in AI too, and I think a lot of there's a lot of people who are concerned with it. You know what I mean? And yeah, there's definitely some situations that could happen down the line, but I think if it's handled in the correct way, it's going to make not only everyone's lives, I think, more efficient, but just better overall.
AI is a dangerous technology. In the wrong hands, it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
That also goes to the value, right? Simple things are not dangerous or not valuable. When you know that there's something really valuable, when it can be really important from a business perspective and really dangerous from, humankind perspective.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole discussion for we did an AI event last year. We'll have to do another one and maybe have you speak on that panel. That'd be a great conversation to have you involved with for sure. But I want to wrap up here because I want to respect your time. I really appreciate you coming on. I love this. I always just like to end with any final thoughts, any final pieces of advice for entrepreneurs, people starting companies, and then where can people find more out about you? How can people get in touch with you? Where should they follow you and all of that?
Yeah. Basically LinkedIn right now is the best place to find me. Just look me up, link in with me, and make sure you make the connection that you met me here because I'm very discerning about those connections. But always happy to help entrepreneurs. I think the one piece of advice that I'm still trying to hone how I deliver this, which is, everybody's had periods in their life where they've been really, really good at something. An easy way to think about that is we probably have some athletes that are on the podcast now. In maybe you're a baseball player, and when you hit a home run, you didn't even feel the ball hit the bat. When you're, in the middle, if you're an actor, you feel like you are that individual that's on the stage, not that you're acting. It's that you lose yourself in that moment, right? You lose yourself in the experience because you're completely immersed in that. And that's something you can practice. Just immerse yourself, whatever it is. If you're going into a tough meeting, you're going into a customer opportunity, or you're solving a problem at work, whatever it might be, allow yourself to be lost in whatever that is. Forget time, forget everything. Just how do you be part of that experience and solve the problem or create the opportunity? And you might come out 3 days later saying, man, I haven't eaten 3 days, but that's okay because you've lost yourself in that opportunity. And that's where you're the best, right? That's where you become one with the problem, where you become one with the situation, where nothing else, you don't hear the noises, right? You're not distracted by the lights. You're just in the moment, and you can practice that. And I try to do that as much as I can. I'm still figuring that out myself, but that's sort of just something to think about for your listeners, and try and figure out how do you create those sensations of just being in the moment.
I absolutely love that, and it's so funny because my favorite song is "Lose Yourself" by Eminem.
By Eminem,
Lose yourself in the moment. So
it is that. That is what he's singing about.
Right.
Rapping about whatever.
Yeah.
But that's Eminem. You got it, Sandra. But yeah, that's it is that. Listen to that song. It's lose yourself. Be in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's so. I absolutely love that. I think it's so critical too, and it's something that you can get lost in a lot of the external things that are going on. If you're there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of things going on, and especially right now in the world, right? That you can lose your train of thought or lose your focus as an entrepreneur. So I absolutely love that. I think that's a great way to end. Great way to end this. And Andy, thank you so much for this. This was amazing.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'd love to, let's definitely stay in touch. Hopefully we can link up in person sometime here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I know we're close by, so let's definitely link up and really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining. I dropped your LinkedIn in there, and I dropped Othot's the link to the website too for everyone who wants to check that out. And stay tuned for more. Go to joinentre.com to connect with other entrepreneurs and investors and cool people. And stay safe and stay healthy out there, everybody. Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you for inviting me. Bye, everybody. Have a good week.
You too. See you guys.